Yeah. Yeah.
Morning, everyone. I am convening the regularly scheduled business meeting for the Kansas Corporation Commission on this Tuesday, June 29th of 2021, and it is 10 a.m. I'm joined by my colleagues, Commissioners Keen and Duffy. On today's agenda, we have 15 consent agenda items, 4 noticed items, and 1 discussion item. We'll move first to our consent agenda. Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review the items on the consent agenda. And let me ask at this point, if you have any questions on the consent agenda items, I'll start with Commissioner Keen
None for me, thank you.
and Commissioner Duffy.
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of the consent agenda items.
Second,
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please vote aye.
Aye.
aye,
Aye. The consent agenda is approved. We will now move to our noticed items. Our first noticed item is in docket number 20, GIMX 393 MIS. And this is a proposed order ending temporary waiver of notary requirement. Our presenter for this item is Mr. Brian Fedotin. Brian?
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. Good morning.
Morning.
On April 21st, the Commission issued an order temporarily waiving notary requirement. And based on the Governor's Executive Order 2123, effective July 15th, the temporary waiver will be revoked and will return to our normal course of business. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review this order, and let me ask if there are any questions, again, beginning with Commissioner Keen
none for me, thank you.
and Commissioner Duffy.
I have none, and I move approval of this order.
Second,
We have a motion and a second to approve the described order. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor, please vote aye.
aye,
Aye. The order is approved. Thank you, Brian. Oh, it looks like you have one more item here.
Yes.
This is our next noticed item is in docket number 21 EKME 380 TAR. And this is a proposed order adopting staff's report and recommendation and approving 2021 energy efficiency rider.
Yes, thank you. Yes, in this order, the Commission adopts staff's report and recommendation in its entirety and approves Evergy's request to recover $581,111 through its 2021 energy efficiency rider. This approval is conditioned upon 2 things. First, Evergy filing its next energy efficiency rider by March 31st, 2022, to include costs incurred for Commission-approved programs from the period January 2021 through December 31st, 2021. And second, in its next filing, Evergy shall include a calculation to true up the amounts collected from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, compared to the amounts intended to be collected from that period. In this order, the commission also encourages Evergy to develop new cost-effective energy efficiency and DSM programs that can result in lower costs for Kansas consumers. To that end, the commission was pleased to learn at its recent work study that Evergy has begun the process of engaging with various stakeholders to support and inform the commission of these new developments and new programs. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Commissioners, you have also had the opportunity to review this proposed order. Are there any questions on this order? I'll start with Commissioner Duffy this time.
Thank you. No questions, but I would make a comment that in reading the material in the docket that I appreciate the comments offered by Curb and thought they were spot on in terms of some of the issues with this docket. I believe it is time for us to move forward with new proposals, and I appreciate the presentation last week by the company and look forward to what is to come before the commission in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Duffy. Commissioner Keen, any questions for Brian?
No questions for me. I would move approval of the order.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the described order. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the order, please vote aye.
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 Aye. The order is approved. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, commissioners.
To our third noticed item, this is in docket number 21, TRAM 47400S. And this is a proposed order on emergency suspension of operating authority. And our presenter for this item is Mr. Hassan Latif. Good morning, Hassan.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. This order arises out of a KHP inspection of a motor carrier in Garden City, Kansas, conducted this past Wednesday, June 23rd. The carrier was found hauling manure in an unsafe manner, was using a trailer that was in dangerous condition and had been involved in a previous fatality accident. The driver did not possess a driver's license or a commercial driver's license, which would have been required due to the weight of the vehicles involved. The truck was registered as a farm vehicle, but although the owners have no farm, and from an interview by our special investigators, Penny Fryback and Erica Pargas, they determined the driver's daughter, Melissa Solorzano, had registered the vehicle for him and was resistant to the advice of our investigators about complying with the law before continuing to operate. The vehicle was placed out of service by the KHP at the time of the inspection and should have been towed to have repairs made, but instead the truck and trailer were driven away to an undisclosed location so that the KHP could impound the vehicles when they were found to remove them from the roadway. Transportation staff sought an interim order from the commission. On last Thursday, June 24th, the commission issued an interim emergency order suspending motor carrier operations of Melissa Solorzano pursuant to the authority granted the commission by KAR 82-1232. The interim order was signed by Chairperson French as outlined in the regulation, but the interim order is only a temporary measure and requires follow-up by the full commission to be issued at a subsequent business meeting. Before you is that follow-up order, which makes the interim suspension permanent pending actions by the carrier to come into compliance. The issuance of emergency orders and interim emergency orders are seldom requested by transportation staff and only in instances where there is a fear that danger to the motoring public is immediate. In this case, staff felt that the circumstances have risen to the level of an emergency suspension of the operations of this carrier for the reasons listed in the order and as I described earlier. Staff recommends approval of this order, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hassan. Maybe real quick before I turn over to my fellow commissioners, I know there, as you mentioned, there's an effort to find and impound this trailer. Has there been any update or success on those efforts to this point?
I don't believe so, but I'll check.
Thank you.
Still at large.
Thank you. Let me turn to my fellow commissioners to see if they have any questions on this action. Commissioner Duffy, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I do have some comments. I'm glad that the chairman took immediate action last week and that we are reaffirming that as a commission. Holy smokes. This is everything that could go wrong in terms of safety for the motoring public. I mean, it was one after another item on here. I was almost in disbelief. This is a danger. This company represents a danger to the public. And I hope that working with our fellow agency, the Highway Patrol and the local law enforcement, we're able to find the vehicle, but further that this company and the operators of the company continue to be under scrutiny and will be dealt with as matters evolve. But I was appalled, frankly, and it was just a good opportunity that we happened upon this. So kudos to our folks, but this is a very scary situation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Duffy. Commissioner Keen, any questions?
No questions. I have some comments as well. I join in basically endorsing all of the comments that Commissioner Duffy has just made. I did a couple more to that. I certainly commend the staff for acting expeditiously and seeking the interim order. I commend you as well, Mr. Chairman, for having signed that interim order. I think under the circumstances, this was very necessary. I'm also pleased that this morning we saw fit to consider this matter as a noticed item, because I think the severity of it, in accord with the comments of Commissioner Duffy, the severity of it merits the special attention we've given this matter this morning and the concern the commission has for this kind of conduct. So with that being said, I will move approval of the order.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the order on emergency suspension of operating authority. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. The order is approved. We now move to our last noticed item. This is in docket number 21 TRAM 466 MIS. And this is a proposed order designating guidance document and approving staff's use of the Transportation Division's Uniform Penalty Assessment Table. And again, our presenter is Mr. Hassan Latif.
Good morning again. The order before you is the culmination of the Transportation Division's annual review of its motor carrier penalty assessments. The Transportation Division's special investigators conduct compliance reviews on motor carriers domiciled in Kansas. At the completion of those compliance reviews, motor carriers are provided with a list of violations that ranges from the very minor to major violations. Major violations result in civil penalties issued by the commission. These fines are aimed at improving the safety of motor carrier operations for the benefit of the motoring public and enforcing motor carrier laws, rules, and regulations. Transportation staff annually reviews the civil fines issued to motor carriers through commission penalty orders and decides to add or remove violations or to adjust the severity of those penalties based on the feedback from our special investigators, trends in the industry, and the state of the motor carrier safety in Kansas. In recommending appropriate fines, staff looks at the size of the businesses and the gravity of the violation. This year's changes are noted in staff's report and recommendation and in the fiscal year 2022 Uniform Penalty Assessment Table, both of which are attached to this order. To briefly summarize the changes, staff seeks to increase penalties on carriers who do not properly track their drivers' hours of service. Failure to follow hours of service rules leads to exhausted and fatigued drivers, which is a leading cause of fatalities on the roadways. The Transportation Division enforces these rules by penalizing drivers who attempt to falsify their driving records after the fact, after not keeping them, and also by penalizing carriers who simply do not track or keep driving records. Staff, in this case, is doubling the amounts of these penalties. This is the first time that these penalties have been increased since the creation of the penalty matrix in fiscal year 2013. These violations make up a small percentage of the total violations issued to carriers each year, But the violations represent a large danger to the public because fatigue drivers contribute a large number to the major accidents that take place. Staff feels that increasing these penalties signals to carriers the importance of managing their drivers lawfully and safely. Additionally, there are several grammatical or non-substantive changes to citations or categories that are noted in the R&R. Staff believes this year's changes are appropriate and that they reflect the current motor carrier industry context and the motor carrier safety regulations. Staff recommends approval of this order, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Latif. Turn to my fellow commissioners to see if they have any questions on this item, and I will start with Commissioner Duffy.
Yes, thank you. I do have some questions. So the review that you are doing now, we review these every year, correct?
That's correct.
But it just happens that this is the first year that you are increasing a fine
Right, for these.
for
specific penalties.
these specific ones listed here. I would like to say, I do appreciate the fact that there is a yearly review of the fine amounts and the fines themselves, and that you talk to investigators. I think your mode of operation as it relates to fines exemplifies what we should be doing throughout the entire agency. It's something that should not be put on a shelf for 20 years or 25 years, and then we start looking at where we can increase a fine because of an issue we're having. Fines are, if you are in compliance with the law, you have nothing to fear. It is those that, for whatever reason, purposefully or purposeful oversight, whatever their motive is, bottom line, it's probably to save money and to make money. And I know that right now with the motor carrier, I believe there, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a shortage of drivers. Is that correct? You're shaking your heads, yes. And as a result, I believe that sometimes companies are putting their drivers in danger, their reputation as a company in danger, but more importantly, they're putting the motoring public in danger in this state and other states. And if they believe they can get away from it by, doing this, or believe the fine is not sufficient enough to stop the practice, that is my concern, that they believe that the financial measure against them is a slap on the pocketbook and really does not amount to anything that changes their behavior. So we're doubling the amounts, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if you can run through briefly what those amounts are, because even though we're doubling, I still believe for the type of infraction, they're not onerous. I mean, it's like, oh, if I screwed up on my paperwork or I let them go too long, whatever, didn't. But like this last instance, no driver's license, not even a CDL, no hours of service. But if you could repeat what the increases are.
Sure. For falsifying reports, these are,
Yes,
that is a penalty which is only intentional because you're falsifying, it's considered an intentional violation. So there's no standard penalty, there's only enhanced penalties.
okay,
For 1 to 10 violations, it goes from 1,000 to 2,000. For 11 to 20, it goes from 2,000 to 3,000. From 21 to 30, it goes from 2,500 to 4,000. And for 31 plus violations, it goes from 3,000 to 5,000. That's to keep within the limits of our upward limit that we have on intentional violations is 5,000 by statute.
okay,
For supporting documents, failure to keep those, the standard penalty for 1 to 10 is 250, it goes to 500. For 11 to 20, it goes from 500 to 750. From 21 to 30 violations, it goes from 750 to 900. And 31 violations or more remains 1,000 because that's the upper limit of the standard penalties we can do in statute. For the enhanced penalties, 1 to 10 is 500 originally, and now goes to 1,000. For 11 to 20, it's 1,000 to, it goes to 1,500. For 21 to 30, it goes from 1,500 to 2,000. And for 31 plus, it goes to from 2,000 to 3,000. So there's increases on all levels of penalties for false reports or supporting documents. The reason we wanted to increase the supporting documents is because we didn't want to incentivize carriers who would otherwise falsify to just claim I don't have any, and they would think they would get a benefit from doing that. So we increased both penalties.
And this was as a result of input from your staff as well as what they're seeing when they're out there doing their investigations and the FMCSA. Yes. Okay. Very good. I applaud you for your efforts and the fact that you are responding to what you are seeing out in the field and what your folks are telling you, and that we are keeping current with our dollar amounts to ensure or hopefully ensure that there is a deterrent from purposely falsifying or just lack of attention to the administrative side of the work that they must keep as a motor carrier for the privilege of being a motor carrier in this state. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I applaud the staff for their work on this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Duffy. Commissioner Keen, any questions for you?
No questions for me. A very brief follow on. Well, I do have a few questions, actually. One brief comment. Commissioner Duffy headed us down the trail that I was contemplating too, so that we could spread across the public record this morning what the changes really are rather specifically. So I thank you for that. I thank Commissioner Duffy for the question as well. Hassan, I think at the outset in describing what's before us in this docket, I think you have pretty articulately addressed the public policy considerations that are involved here. And by going through the sort of itemized list of the changes that have been made here, that does highlight the rationale behind why those are made. The only really question I would have is in terms of frequency of violations, do the kinds of matters that we're addressing by virtue of penalty, of the increases in penalty fines and assessments, obviously there's a level of seriousness here that we've taken care of. Does it also coincidentally mirror the frequency of violations in those particular areas?
So there, we did do some research at the best of Commissioner Duffy as to what the numbers were for the number of time we issue these violations. Have that. They're not issued as often, but when they're issued, they're high dollar amounts. So they are ones that come to the attention of the commission when we do them. For example, for false reports, in the previous years, we usually are average around 10 violations per year of the violations we do. So in fiscal year 2020, there were 9 violations for falsifying reports out of a total of 18. It's 1,899. In 2019, there were 13 violations, and that was a more typical year where we had 2,830 violations cited. For supporting documents, there are more violations, but they're still not highly high frequency. In 2020, there were 38 supporting document violations out of the 1,899. In 2019, there were 39 out of 2,830. So it's a small part, but we are concerned about them because they have such a direct connection to the possibility of a fatality. That's why we wanted to increase them.
I thank you for that answer. That was an excellent answer. One final bullet on top of this would be, is there frequently an occurrence where, given the nature of any one of these violations, as serious as they are, you frequently see a compounding of violations by the same carrier for the same incident?
I think what happens is we often do, because we do the follow-up reviews, And if we can identify the carrier as being a problem carrier when we follow up and have, they have the same violations. I think that lack of attention to these are like heart basis, like for the work of a motor carrier. And so inattention to these details is usually symptomatic of larger problems within the motor carrier. But I defer to staff. If they have any questions or any comments.
I can answer other than for Gary. I have an opinion, but I'll let him deal with the numbers. The investigators do a really good job. We don't want to have people double jeopardy violation. But if it's a violation, there may be rules like if someone, for example, would be a drug and alcohol post accident. If they didn't do either one of those, we will cite them on both those. Because there are times one of the other two be left out. They just need to understand it's separate regulation.
That's fine. I appreciate the answer. Son, thank you for the information. Same to you, Gary. I have no other questions. I would move approval of the order.
If I could, Commissioner Keen, I do have a question. I'm reading a lot about dropping the age of drivers from 21 on these 18-wheel trucks to 18. And what do you all, have you been looking at this? Do you have an opinion? Are you hearing from your carriers about this? Knowing that a brain is not completely formed until the age of 26, but understanding there is a shortage of drivers, especially those who want to do long hauls. And a lot of companies, that's why they're building these warehouses, is my understanding. So it is a day's work from point A to point B, and they can get back and be home. But have you been following this issue since we have our representatives from transportation here? And do you have an opinion or?
And I should have mentioned this before, but if, before you speak, could you either grab a lapel mic or just walk up to the podium for our folks watching online?
It is a topic of discussion at CBSA and across the industry due to the driver shortage. A lot of the fear is by the time they reach the age, they've already gone down another career path. And so they're looking for ways to help the issue with the shortage of drivers. Do I think there's a concern? Yeah, there's a great concern, but a lot of it is based on the individual. If you look across the board, there is a large percentage that I think you're going to see potential for more accidents if these younger population of drivers are entered into the nation's highways. It's a huge concern. So. Right. You know, intrastate, you can operate at that younger age, but when you start taking on the ability to go across country, I think it's just that level of concern that it's why it hasn't happened before. So.
Okay.
that answers your question.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And actually, I'm sorry, I did not know that 18-year-olds were allowed intrastate. So I'll be looking to see who's in the driver's seat. I know the reaction time is faster, and you're right. It
Yeah.
does have to deal with the individual.
Yeah.
But I am concerned about who's behind that wheel.
You have a driver that grows up on a farm or someplace where he's
Yes.
used to working around vehicles.
Right.
Those people are going to be way more competent than somebody that's never been inside of a large vehicle, a tractor, or anything like that. They're going to be more responsible. The others have a large learning curve.
Do the current driver shortages increase? I mean, there's already a trend and a push for autonomous vehicles. Is that trend being accelerated or even more interest given shortages?
You're seeing things daily on the autonomous vehicles. I think for that very reason, and just because that seems to be the way of the future. And about everything we do, the less the human element that we take out of it, the more efficient they're going to be. So that's yet to be determined though, based on where we operate. You know, here in the plains, it may work out fairly well. you get in some areas where the connectivity may not be as good. There could be some problems, or weather, or accident, animals, things like that. But there's a lot to work out yet.
Are there any experiments or pilots going on in the state of Kansas where they're going from point A to point B, like out in the western half? Are you aware of anything?
I'm not aware of any. Have you heard anything, Gary? Yeah, they talk about it every year at the legislature, but I haven't heard anything either. So
Okay, I
I do
appreciate
think it'd
that.
be a good place to start.
Mike, what are the causes of the shortage of CDL or qualified drivers?
I think we've had an aging workforce for a long time, and it's just the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, you have that age difference from when they can start into the industry. Most of them just don't end up staying in the transportation, the driving jobs. They look for something else because they can't wait that 3 years. So they're headed down a different career path. But we've had an aging population forever, and it's just now catching up with us. Plus as I mentioned a couple weeks ago in the admin meeting, the sales of vehicles are up. The industry is booming right now. We're issuing, like I said, 100,000 plus DOT numbers in the first 5 months. That's unheard of in a long time. So it's just a lot of things that are kind of compounding the issue right now.
So a lot more activity on the road, needing more truckers because people are buying, quote, online, Amazon and whoever, and
Exactly.
right. Okay. I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I just feel that the issues we talk about related to transportation are really life and death issues. As we think about that big vehicle on the road and the potential ramifications. So I appreciate the time we spent on this subject today.
If I may,
Go ahead.
one thing I might add too, the issue with the violations has been an issue that you and I talked about.
Mhm.
And I think I mentioned with both of you, Mr. Chairman, recently. These violations at roadside compound the issue for insurance. And the insurance, I'm trying to put together a kind of a team to look at this with the Department of Revenue and the industry. So we can maybe make the issue with these violations fit the crime, because right now the insurance issue is if you pay for an insurance for a month, you can get your registration, your plates, but then you drop it, you still have a piece of paper that says you have insurance for the next year. We need to get around that. If we can force that, because insurance with if you have violations, your insurance is going to go up. And these people that aren't complying know that. And so they just get it for a short time to get their plates to kind of mask the issue of compliance up there on the road. So we need to get that team together and figure out how we can really force the issue, force compliance through registration and insurance.
And when I was in revenue, this was a problem even back then. So I do think it can be dealt with now that we're electronic.
Yeah.
And there ought to be a connectivity from a filing of something at roadside that automatically goes back to the carrier, or also the daughter of the cousin of whoever now it's in their name. These things, I believe we have more tools in the toolbox to end this kind of gamesmanship.
Yep, agreed. There'll be more to come on that. So
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have a motion to approve the proposed order, but do not yet have a second.
And I will offer my second. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second now to approve the proposed described order by Mr. Latif. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the order, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. The order is approved. Thank you, Mr. Latif.
Thank you.
Our next item on our agenda is consideration and approval of the commission's fiscal year 2022 commission business meeting schedule. Commissioners, I believe you have had the opportunity to review that schedule, and I would entertain a motion to approve it.
I move that we adopt the FY 2022 business meeting schedule for the Kansas Corporation Commission effective July 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 2022 business meeting schedule. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
One brief item, very brief. It's all perspective, but I'm thinking that the president recently declared June 19th as a national holiday. What the state of Kansas does from here is yet to be determined, either through the governor or the legislature. So I'm just thinking that in terms of scheduling into June of next year, we might anticipate that since the 19th occurs on a Sunday, conceivably that Monday may become a state holiday. So we might anticipate that in scheduling events that far out. That's the end of my comment.
I agree. I think that's highly likely that we will see a change to the state of Kansas holiday schedule. And I think we can adjust on the fly with our business meetings, correct? All right. We have a motion and a second to approve the business meeting schedule. Those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. The schedule is approved. This time, I will move the commission enter into executive session not to exceed 60 minutes to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1 to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. And I further move that the following be included in the meeting, our executive director, Lynn Retz. So at this time, and then we would reconvene, I guess, at 11:35. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to enter into executive session, please vote aye.
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 Aye. We'll reconvene at 11:35. Thank you all. Okay, the commission is returning from executive session. It is 11:35. And at this time, I would move the commission extend its executive session for 30 additional minutes to reconvene at 12:05.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to extend the executive session to reconvene at 12:05. Those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
We are now back in executive session. This is Commissioner French. The commission has returned from executive session where no action was taken. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the commission's business meeting.
I move we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Duffy. I will second that motion. Those in favor of adjourning, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.